Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, and I'm the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. I'm a past member of the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee, and currently I serve on the MS Society's Community Review of MS Research Committee. I'm a district activist leader and trustee for the National MS Society, and I chair the Society's California Government Relations Advisory Committee. The MS Society's Ask an MS Expert webcast is designed to give us a place for the MS community to connect and to connect you with experts who are ready to answer your questions on the topics that impact people affected by MS every day. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. MS Navigators are online throughout today's program, answering those questions and connecting you to resources. No one is immune from experiencing stress and anxiety, and living with MS can sometimes increase these feelings. While stress and anxiety have some shared symptoms, they're not quite the same thing. And understanding the difference between the two can help you identify what you're experiencing and then better manage those symptoms. Joining us today to talk about the impact that stress and anxiety have on your physical and mental health, along with strategies you can use to help you manage the stress and anxiety in your life, is Dr. Bree Wanamaker. Dr. Wanamaker lives with MS, and she's a licensed professional counselor and chief therapist and consultant in her practice, Just Us Counseling and Consulting, LLC, in South Carolina. Welcome, Dr. Wanamaker. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
We all experience feelings of stress and anxiety at some point, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But unmanaged stress and anxiety can interfere with your daily life and take a toll on your mental and your physical health. To start us off, can you explain the difference between stress and anxiety, and then tell us how someone can tell them apart?
So when you're thinking about stress is defined as any type of changes that can cause physical, emotional, or some type of psychological strain. It's our body's response to pretty much anything that's going to require attention or action or for us to do something, right? But the thing about with stress is we all are going to respond very differently to all of the things that we have to do in life. And so stress has a lot to do with our reactions of what happens around us and our perception of the situation. So for instance, I'm standing in the line at the grocery store, but I know I'm running late for work or I'm running late to pick someone up. That situation is going to be stressful for me because of the perception that this is going to make me late. This person in front of me is now counting pennies. And so it's my perception of what's happening around me, and it's the external types of spaces. When we think about anxiety is more so our internal. It's the things that it's our internal reaction. Sometimes it can start with a small thought, and then it kind of builds from there. I like to describe anxiety as that space between the known and the unknown, right? So it is our mind. Something great happens, we laugh, we celebrate, we smile. Something bad happens, we cry, we have all of the feelings associated with a negative experience that may happen. Anxiety is that space of in between. It's like our brain ping-ponging back and forth, trying to find a resolution so that I know what I need to do next. And so that space of the unknown is where anxiety kind of starts, and it keeps building from there, because what we end up doing is we play all of these random scenarios over and over, and usually they end up being the worst case scenarios, right? It's never like, oh, this is going to work out. Because if that was the case, we'd be level again. But what ends up happening is we keep all the things that can go wrong. And it keeps kind of building from there. And that creates that space of anxiety. So when you're looking at the biggest difference between the two, it's the external things versus our internal type of reaction and how we kind of feed those things. Stress is usually kind of in the moment, kind of levels you out right after the stressor is gone. Oh, I'm going to be on time. Or I picked up this person 5 minutes late. It's over. Anxiety, though, keeps coming back, can keep coming back. And oftentimes it's also hard to pinpoint what the source of anxiety is. With stress, you know what's kind of stressing you. So it's easier to pinpoint, like, this person in front of me at the grocery store is stressing me out, or the traffic is. So I can kind of figure out exactly what that is. Anxiety is very different, and it's hard to kind of put a needle on what's really bothering you.
Well, I think you just started to answer my very next question. I was going to ask you, what are some of the common causes of stress and anxiety? We have that person at the grocery store counting as one common cause.
So definitely the grocery store. But when we think about anxiety again is that uncertainty space, and it can be triggered again by almost anything. It's this vague sense of like dread or that something bad is going to happen. But anxiety can also be triggered by caffeine, certain medications, lack of oxygen, consumption of different substances like alcohol or cocaine. Your body can have those same physical types of responses that you would have with anxiety, and it can mimic anxiety in some of those situations. Medical conditions can also cause anxiety. And so we have to be mindful of those things. But when we talk about the causes of stress, it can be work, having a boss that's not supportive, or just an ineffective people leader at work. It can be a major workload. It can be being insecure about your job, whether or not you're going to have one tomorrow, whether or not you're going to have an MS flare, and you start to stress about not hitting a project deadline. It can also be just the day-to-day life, washing dishes, doing the laundry, making my home look presentable for people. So stress can be triggered by both good and bad things. Buying a house, that's good stress, but it's still stressful, right? Finances, relationships, people. People are big stresses, and we can't control other people, but we can control how they impact us. But even parenting, and then also just managing you and your day-to-day kind of the way your body's reacting to the environment that day can also cause additional stressors for you.
What are some of the common misconceptions about stress and anxiety?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's the same for everybody. Like anxiety looks the same for this person or that person. So when we watch TV, what we see a lot of times, people who are having anxiety or panic attacks, in the moment, they're sweating, they're trembling, they're shaking, they're crouched in a corner somewhere. And that's not what it always looks like. Sometimes it's your stomach. You can't keep anything down, or you're feeling queasy on your stomach. And so I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is that it looks the same for everybody. Or if you're stressed out, your blood pressure is high, you can't sleep. That's not always the case when it comes to stress either. I think one of the other misconceptions, if I don't have any symptoms, nothing's happening different in my body, then I'm not stressed. That's a lie. You may not feel it just yet, but it doesn't mean that you're not stressed. And it doesn't mean that it has to show up physically for you either. It can show up emotionally or cognitively when it comes to your thinking. And I think the other, like if you're happy all the time, then you're never going to be stressed. Like everything is not rainbows and unicorns. And if you take that approach, like everything is always sunshine, then you're never going to be stressed or have anxiety. That's also not the truth. Stress is just a common part of life. It is it's a day-to-day thing. It's how we manage it and how we perceive it, which is really what's going to make that difference.
Well, I heard you mention stomach issues related to anxiety, maybe difficulty falling asleep. How can stress and anxiety impact someone's physical as well as their mental health?
So when we think about anxiety usually is kind of, it's going to trigger that fight or flight type of thing. If you are in a moment of feeling anxious about something, your stress hormones are going to be triggering that adrenaline and all of those things. And so initially it can help in that immediate kind of situation. But when you're in a constant state of anxiety over a long period of time, those hormones and those types of stressors can start to impact your immune system. It can break that down. It can, and if it's a chronic type of thing, your body never kind of levels out again when it's constantly in that fight or flight type of motion. You're looking for the next danger, looking for the next threat. And so when you have that amount of prolonged stress, again, it impacts your immune system. But when we talk about like chronic stress, it can put you at a greater risk for, mental health. And exacerbated mental health conditions, including anxiety. So there it is. Like, but sometimes it's like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? But also digestive issues, headaches, muscle tension, and stress. Some of us hold our stress in our neck. We're at work and we look and we're crouched up like this and can't figure out why. We're stressed and it's starting. Our muscles are tightening. Pain, heart disease, and high blood pressure, of course, some of those common ones, but also weight gain, and having problems with your memory and being able to like recall facts, or just, I can't focus, I can't concentrate. So it's so many different things and different ways that stress and anxiety can impact us. And so, it's kind of like MS, right? We think about what MS impacts. They tell us it can impact everything. It impacts our brain and our spine, which controls every function we have, right? And so we think about stress and anxiety, your mood, your appetite, your sleeping, your physical, your emotional, like it kind of runs hand in hand with a lot of those things.
Let's turn our attention to some common daily stressors and effective coping mechanisms. Can you talk about some of the common emotional, mental, and physical stressors that are experienced by people who are living with MS?
I think one of the biggest common stressors is that of just the uncertainty about the future, right? When it comes to dealing with MS and not knowing, because we can't see what our brain and our spine is doing. We can't see when a new lesion is forming, but, we might feel a new symptom, or I might wake up feeling this way one day. And it's like, what is this? Is this MS, or did I just not sleep well enough? And so a lot of times, some of the biggest stressors is just that uncertainty about what tomorrow holds, or the doctor's appointments, right? When we're preparing for the MRI scans, we're preparing, for our next treatment, we're switching medications. While for some people, it is so simple to go from a brand name to a generic. For me, I was like, I'm sorry. They're telling me I have to go generic. I've always had the brand name. And it was this whole type of conversation and dialogue back and forth between me and my neurologist. That was stressing for me. But they were like, it's the same chemicals, Sabrina. I need you to understand that. I need you to breathe. And I'm like, but what if it doesn't work the same? And so something as simple for people going to a Walmart brand of Tylenol to actual Tylenol, where that's not a stressor, for individuals dealing with MS, those small changes can become a major, major stressor in the moment. Dealing with just day-to-day life as housekeeping, those can be stressors, and wanting your house to look a certain way, but not having the physical energy to get it to that space. People, again, we all have somebody in our life that we know when we get off that call, it is emotionally draining. Being able to just say, I'm not answering the call today, right? But some of those just day-to-day common things, work, trying to manage and balance it all. Those are, and it's not uncommon to feel overwhelmed, because the one thing we have to understand is our body functions differently than those who may not be living with MS. And fatigue is very real. It is invisible, but it is very, very real. Brain fog is very real. And so when you're having these small little things in the day-to-day life, like washing the dishes, when you're fatigued, it feels like a monumental task. And so being able to figure out and just identify what your stresses look like, because my stresses are not your stresses. Folding laundry is a stressor for me. Ironing clothes is a stressor. We're going to put it in the dryer, let the dryer do its work. That's how I operate in that space. But it's really figuring out, those common things can be people, can be work, it can be housekeeping, it can be chores, it can be just even waking up feeling a little differently than you felt yesterday. Those are a lot of those common small stressors for people specifically with MS.
Well, I think we heard you earlier when you said that you may not feel it, but you are still stressed on occasion. So Vanessa got in touch with us and she's asking, how does someone know when they're stressed?
So some of the ways that you, first, you want to know your body, know your moods, right? That's going to be the first thing. Like, in order to know that you're stressed, you got to know where your baseline starts. But you can look for different signs like difficulty concentrating, or you're worrying more, or you're starting to feel anxious in spaces that you didn't feel anxious before, or you can't remember. Now, we all have walked into a room and got in there and couldn't figure out, like, why did I come in here? What was I doing? I came in here for, I'll make up little random songs sometimes, right? Going to the grocery store, I have a list and I'll make up a little song to remember the list. But we all have those moments, but are they starting to become more often where you are having trouble remembering? Are you becoming irritated and moody and frustrated constantly? Is your blood pressure going up? Are you starting to see changes in weight, whether it is one end of the spectrum or the other? Because some people gain weight because they're eating, or the stress hormone can cause you to gain weight, and some people lose weight. So are there changes in your weight? Are you constantly having colds or different types of infections? Changes in your sex drive, changes in your menstrual cycle if you're a woman. And so you look at those different types of things, but also, are you not taking care of yourself? Your hygiene can start to reflect when you're feeling some stresses, but poor self-care. So just not taking care of yourself in general, but starting to rely on drugs and alcohol to make yourself feel good. Or to kind of level yourself out, or taking an extra dose of your medication to level yourself out. And, those types of things can be some indicators for you to know when you are stressed.
We heard from Carter, who says he can't turn his mind off at night. Do you have any suggestions for Carter?
So, racing thoughts, as we call it, or, just the constant feels like I just can't settle at night. Is pretty common. One of the things that I have found helpful, and, that I talk to clients about and just different people about in general, is writing things down. I heard someone say our brain was made to create ideas, not to hold them. And so even if it's an idea of a to-do item that I have to do tomorrow, write it down. So I keep notepads beside my bed. I have several. Now, the problem is I'm learning is, like, I have a lot of notepads with things written. So I'm trying to, like, compile all my notepads, but it gets it out of your head and onto paper. So keeping a journal by your bed to just jot some things down to kind of help get it out of your head. Mindless TV. Mindless TV for me became looking at, like, House Hunters or cooking shows, A Different World, because I'd already seen, like, all of the seasons, all of the episodes. And so it was something that actually helped to calm me down in moments when I was feeling anxious, especially during COVID. But it was things I could fall asleep to as well. Essential oils. I am big on essential oils now. Lavender is really good for, like, sleeping. They also have, like, a lavender sleep spray you can put on your pillow that has, like, lavender and melatonin. Some people take melatonin. If I don't have to take anything, I don't want to take anything. So I'll spray my environment, but also look at your sleep environment. Are you sleeping on the couch? Are you going to bed? Is there light? Can you turn the lights off? But also, I listen to some meditation music at night, or the Abide app for me specifically, listening to different sounds and, different Bible stories. That's just kind of how I've learned how to kind of turn my mind off at night, or some of those ways. And also look at the temperature in your space and control as much of that as you can. Are you too hot or too cold? Because those types of things can impact your sleep and being able to kind of put your body in a restful state too, when it comes to even relaxing your mind in that space too.
Michelle wants to know about effective coping mechanisms or lifestyle modifications that she can use at home that can help her manage her stress and anxiety.
First and foremost, control what you can control. I use a 4 kind of block grid, and like, these things are important, I can control. Unimportant, I can control it. Unimportant, I have no control. And important, I still have no control. And so learning those things that you can control also help us to manage our stress and anxiety. Because if you think, if you really look at the things that we stress about and that we're anxious about, a lot of those things are outside of our control. Someone else's health condition, we have no control over that. Someone else's situation in general, a lot of times we stress about other people. We have no control over those things. And so really looking at, can I or can't I control this? And so being able to identify that, identifying what stresses you. Is it your environment? Is it the pile of clothes on the floor? If it's the pile of clothes on the floor, can you fold 3 pieces at once? Can the other people in the house do their laundry themselves or fold their own clothes versus you having to take on all of the things? Create a list of items to do so that you can see what it looks like, but also mark it off when you do it. That little small victory feeds like that positive reinforcement for you as well. And so, those are small things that you're able to do, but ask for help. I think that's the biggest thing, is that, we hear MS warrior, you're a warrior. Warriors have to fight, right? But the thing that we forget is warriors don't fight alone. There are often other warriors beside them, or other people who are supporting, sending supplies. They're doing something in the background to help this warrior along the way. And so being able to simply ask for help if it's available. It could be, can you take out the trash? Can you do this for me? I just need someone to talk to. That's also asking for help. And so these are small things that you can do at home that will be able to impact, but also create some structure. Like, have a day. I might load I have a timer cube that I use because I will ping pong from task to task in my house and I never get things done. So I flip my timer cube to 15 minutes and we're going to stay right here in this kitchen for 15 minutes just to finish cleaning the kitchen, to load the dishwasher, to do those things. And if my 15 runs out, I can flip it for another 15. But it has made me to focus in that one area. And then, but it helps me to create structure. And so you find these little small tricks that help you in your day-to-day at home life that turn into larger gains over time.
Chris is wondering how someone will know if they need to see a mental health professional for their stress and anxiety, and what kind of support can that professional offer?
So one of the things that you'll know, how much is it? The thing that we ask people to look at is, how much is this impacting your day-to-day ability to function and your overall life, right? Are you able to complete tasks at work? Are you able to take care of yourself, your daily living? So showering, bathing. Sometimes when you're stressing and when you are anxious, it starts to impact your overall ability to just function in day-to-day life and take care of the bare basics. And so that's one of the things and one of the ways. But if you start, of course, feeling some things physically, or multiple people are telling you there's a shift in your mood and you're a lot more snippy, then it's probably time to get some help. So the way that a professional can actually help is, number one, they're objective. So they have no, I don't want to say they have no skin in the game, but they are there to provide for you a safe space and to be completely objective, but to also help you find those solutions where you're able to help manage and help to create a better life and a better environment for yourself. But they have different tools and different skill sets to help you engage and to, again, provide that kind of just clear-headed perspective that helps you to gain more perspective. So what we find in the therapy space is that our clients already have solutions. It's just there's so much noise around them that it's hard to kind of dig through. And so we help you to find the solutions that work for you. We don't necessarily give advice. If your therapist is always telling you exactly what to do, you want to get another therapist. Because our goal is to help you to self-manage. We want you to gain the tools, go out, try life. And if you need me, come back. But our goal is to help you to be able to do these things on your own and to be able to function. And so that's some of the things that we can actually provide in that space, is to help empower you to get to the spaces that you're wanting to be.
Stress and anxiety are emotional responses that are part, of someone's overall mental health. And we recognize that mental health is a major component of wellness. So, what are some potential long-term consequences of ignoring mental health concerns?
Mhm. So the same way physical health, if you ignore something physically, it gets worse over time. And so early detection and early intervention is extremely helpful. The same thing goes for your mental health, right? And so the earlier you can get help also helps for you to have, first off, better outcomes. The longer you wait, the more it can impact your relationships with family and friends and significant others, because communication can start to become an issue. It can start to impact your work by ignoring it, because now you're not able to focus on tasks. Performance management may start to come into play, or depending on the type of mental health concerns that you're dealing with or symptoms that you're dealing with, not showing up to work. It can lead to termination, but it can also lead to financial difficulties, which again cause more stress. So as we're ignoring those things and not paying attention to it, it can exacerbate or make things worse in other areas of our life. But it can also lead to, again, substance abuse, because you're trying to find a way to make yourself feel better, and unintentionally end up with a substance misuse disorder. But it also impacts your physical health. So again, staying in that fight or flight mode, staying in those areas where the stress hormones are kind of on 10 always, can start to cause fatigue, insomnia, and again, put you at higher risk for some of those things that we kind of talked about earlier, dealing with like heart disease and blood pressure.
Roxanne is a care partner for her husband, George, and she tells us that she thinks George is depressed, which is not uncommon for people who are living with MS. And Roxanne is wondering, how can she encourage George to talk more freely about his feelings and perhaps get help from a therapist?
Sometimes it is that space and feeling like it's okay to not be okay. And so it could be, honestly, sometimes just asking, like, how are you doing? Like, for real talk, no sugarcoating. I know you're going to say okay, but it seems like something's different. Are you really okay? And letting them know that it's okay to, even as your husband, to have a weak moment, even as somebody who's seen as so strong, because we're told you got to be strong all the time, right? So even being able to just have that safe space. You're sharing a little bit about your concern about him, and that you've noticed some changes, and giving concrete examples. Not things have changed, but in what way? So it could be as simple as, we were watching your favorite episode of Big Bang Theory, and normally you are laughing in tears and you barely cracked a smile. Or you are normally smiling or whatever, humming when you're eating your chocolate ice cream. And I noticed that it barely brought you any joy, or you barely touched it. Those are concrete examples of the changes, so that they can understand what it is that you're seeing. And then also suggesting that you talk to someone together, and you can make it about you. I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can to support you, and that I'm showing up for you in the ways that you need. And so I would like for us to talk to someone together. And then that can be a way to encourage him, but to also getting help from a therapist, but where you're going together. So there is that support if he is resistant to going on his own.
Well, you shared some great information today, Dr. Wanamaker. What would you say are the top 3 takeaways that you'd like our viewers to remember?
I think the top 3 takeaways is know your body. Know your body, know who you are, know your moods, that kind of thing. Know your MS symptoms, so that you can realize when something is shifting and changing within yourself. Get a self-care plan together. A lot of times we wait to do self-care when we feel like we are at our wits' end and there's nothing else we can do. That's actually respite. That's not self-care. That's recovery, right? And so getting a self-care plan in place and implementing regularly. It could be as simple as, again, watching mindless TV, eating your favorite snack, not indulging too much, but and find at least two people that can be those safe spaces for you to really talk about how you feel, but that are also willing to talk to you about the changes that they may have seen, because we know that MS can affect our mood and our cognitive ability. And so how does our mind tell our mind that our mind is wrong, right? And so having those outside people that are able to say, I've seen those changes in you. And so having those support people and really doing that. And so identifying at least two if you can.
Well, I want to thank everyone who submitted some excellent questions, and thank you, Dr. Wanamaker, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it today.
Before we close, I want to remind you that the National MS Society's MS Navigator team is your best partner when it comes to connecting you to the very best information and resources on living with MS. You can reach an MS Navigator by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. For information and resources on MS, please be sure to visit the Society's website. You'll find research updates and news, information on connection programs like self-help groups. You'll hear about ways to get involved, and you'll learn about upcoming events that are taking place near you. Remember, you can connect with the National MS Society and others affected by MS on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I hope you'll join me every week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where I continue the conversation that we start here. You'll find Real Talk MS at realtalkms.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I'd like to thank Dr. Wanamaker for joining us today. Please remember that a recording of this webcast will be available at the Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. I hope you'll join us at this same time for next week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. You can always find our upcoming program topics on the National MS Society's website. And now I have a favor to ask each of you. Getting your feedback on today's webcast is important. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, you'll see a link to a survey pinned to the comments section. On YouTube, you'll find that link in the program description. Completing the survey makes a real difference. The information you provide helps us continuously improve, and it helps shape future programs. The survey takes just 1 minute, so I hope you'll take a minute to fill it out. On behalf of Dr. Bree Wanamaker and the National MS Society, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe and make healthy choices.